My name is Mia Thompson, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would still be fighting for basic respect from my own family. What was supposed to be our first vacation together in years quickly turned into another reminder of where I stood in the family hierarchy. When my parents told me to sleep on the couch so my brother could have the bed, I finally reached my breaking point. Before I dive into what happened, drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to join me on this journey of self-discovery. I grew up in a seemingly picture-perfect family in suburban Boston. From the outside, we were the American dream with our colonial-style house, manicured lawn, and successful parents. My father, Richard Thompson, built his reputation as one of the most ruthless corporate lawyers in Massachusetts, while my mother, Sandra, managed the administrative operations of a prestigious hospital. They created a life of privilege and high expectations, especially for their children. My younger brother, Jake, now 30, and I grew up with every material advantage, but emotional support was distributed quite differently between us. From the earliest days, I can remember Jake was the center of our family universe. He was the son my father always wanted, the baby my mother doted on, and apparently the only child worth celebrating. Despite being only 2 years younger than me, Jake received endless second chances and unconditional support that somehow never extended my way. When Jake brought home average grades, my parents would praise his effort. When I brought home straight A's, it was simply expected. The pattern continued through our entire childhood. In high school, Jake joined the football team, but rarely got playing time. Still, my parents attended every game, cheering wildly from the stands. When I became captain of the debate team and qualified for national competitions, my father claimed he was too busy with work to attend. My mother would show up occasionally, but spend most of the time texting or stepping out to make calls. College showcased our differences even more dramatically. I worked part-time jobs while maintaining a 3.9 GPA and graduating with honors. Jake barely passed his classes, switched majors 3 times, and took 6 years to graduate with a general studies degree. Yet somehow my parents funded his entire education, including a semester abroad that he spent mostly partying while I cobbled together scholarships and loans to pay my own way. The inequality became even more apparent after graduation. I worked my way up at a financial consulting firm, eventually becoming one of the youngest senior consultants in the company history. Meanwhile, Jake bounced between jobs, never lasting more than a year at any position. He started numerous business ventures that inevitably failed, from an artisanal ice cream shop to a fitness app that never launched. Each time my parents would bail him out financially, often investing tens of thousands of dollars into his half-baked schemes. When Jake decided he wanted to try his hand at real estate, my parents gifted him the down payment for his condo. When I purchased my first apartment, they sent a houseplant. That pretty much summed up the difference in their investment in our lives. I spent most of my 20s trying to prove my worth through achievement. Surely, if I worked hard enough, saved enough, accomplished enough, they would finally see me as Jake's equal. I advanced in my career, built a solid investment portfolio, and developed expertise in my field. I even made sure to call home weekly, send thoughtful gifts for every occasion, and show interest in my parents' lives. Nothing changed their fundamental perception that Jake deserved more simply because he was Jake. Family gatherings were particularly painful. Last Thanksgiving, I spent hours helping my mother prepare the meal, while Jake watched football with Dad. When dinner was served, my mother had prepared all of Jake's favorite dishes and forgotten the single side dish I had requested. When I mentioned it, she rolled her eyes and said, "You've always been so picky, Mia." The fact that I had only asked for one thing while Jake's preferences dominated the entire menu was apparently irrelevant. At Christmas 2 years ago, I noticed that Jake received significantly more expensive gifts than I did. When I casually mentioned it to my mother later, she became defensive and said, "Jake needs more help than you do. You're so independent, Mia. We know you don't need us." Being self-sufficient had somehow become a reason to receive less care, not more respect. These patterns wore me down over the years. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Warner, who helped me recognize the unhealthy family dynamics at play. She introduced me to terms like golden child scapegoat and emotional neglect. While putting names to these experiences was validating, it also forced me to confront the painful reality of my family situation. "Why do you keep trying to win their approval?" Dr. Warner would ask during our sessions. "Because they're my family." I would answer as if that explained everything. It took years of therapy to start believing that I deserved better treatment regardless of blood ties. I began establishing small boundaries, like limiting my visits home and not dropping everything when Jake had another crisis. Even these minor changes met with resistance and guilt trips from my parents. Last spring, I received a significant promotion at work. I would be leading a new division focused on sustainable investing, a project I had championed for years. It came with a substantial raise, increased responsibilities, and validation of my hard work. For once, I wanted my family to acknowledge my achievement. Around the same time, Jake had landed a job at a friend's marketing firm. It wasn't particularly impressive, considering his friend created the position specifically for him, but it was the longest he had been employed in years. My mother suggested we should celebrate both our accomplishments with a family vacation. "It's been ages since we all spent quality time together," she said over the phone. "We should go somewhere special." I latched onto the idea immediately. Maybe this vacation would be the turning point in our family dynamic. Maybe now that Jake and I were both doing well professionally, we could finally be seen as equals. I had no idea just how wrong I would be. The idea of a family vacation initially filled me with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Part of me believed this could be our chance to reconnect and heal old wounds. Maybe in a new environment, away from the weight of our history in that Boston house, my parents would finally see me clearly. I could handle the planning, I offered during our family video call to discuss the vacation. Travel arrangements were part of my job after all. I regularly organized executive retreats and international conferences. A family vacation would be simple by comparison. My father immediately frowned. "We don't need anything extravagant, Mia. Your mother and I were thinking somewhere local, maybe Cape Cod." "But this is a special occasion," I countered. "We're celebrating my promotion and Jake's new job. Why not go somewhere truly memorable?" "Well, what did you have in mind?" my mother asked, though her tone suggested she was already prepared to dismiss whatever I suggested. "What about Hawaii?" I proposed. "I've never been, and I've always wanted to go." To my surprise, Jake immediately perked up. "Hawaii would be awesome. I could try surfing." Just like that, with Jake's approval, my suggestion was suddenly acceptable. My parents exchanged glances and nodded. "Hawaii could work," my father conceded. "But nothing too expensive, Mia. We're not made of money." This from the man who had just funded Jake's third attempt at starting a home brewery in his garage. I bit my tongue. "I can find something within budget," I assured them. "And I have some connections in the hospitality industry that might help us get a good deal." My mother immediately began listing her requirements: ocean views, not too many stairs, proximity to shopping. My father wanted assurances about the quality of the golf courses. Jake chimed in with his own demands about nightlife and adventure excursions. No one asked what I might want from the vacation. After the call ended, I sat at my computer feeling deflated. Already the pattern was reasserting itself. I was the facilitator, the organizer, the one making things happen while everyone else's preferences took priority. For a moment, I considered backing out entirely. Then I had an idea. What if instead of fighting for scraps of approval, I took control of the situation. I had recently received a substantial bonus for bringing in a major client. Combined with my employee discounts and industry connections, I could afford to upgrade our accommodations significantly without anyone knowing until we arrived. The thought of their surprised faces when they realized I had arranged something special gave me a small thrill. Maybe this gesture would finally make them see me differently. I spent the next few weeks researching options, calling contacts, and making arrangements. I settled on the Royal Hawaiian Resort in Waikiki, an iconic luxury property known for its impeccable service and stunning location. And not just standard rooms. I worked directly with the hotel manager, Mr. Kanahele, to secure the Presidential Penthouse Suite, a 2-story accommodation with 3 bedrooms, a private pool, and panoramic ocean views. "This is quite an impressive booking, Ms. Thompson," Mr. Kanahele said during one of our planning calls. "Is it for a special occasion?" "Yes," I replied. "It's a surprise for my family." I arranged everything down to the smallest detail. The master bedroom would be for my parents with a special anniversary arrangement, even though it wasn't their anniversary. The second largest room would be prepared for me, and the third bedroom would be for Jake. There would be welcome baskets with everyone's favorite snacks, a refrigerator stocked with our preferred beverages, and a private dinner on the terrace our first night. I kept the full extent of my plans secret from my family, allowing them to believe we were simply staying in standard ocean view rooms that I had managed to book at a discount. I wanted to see their faces when they realized what I had done. My best friend Stephanie was skeptical when I told her about my plan. "Mia, honey, are you sure this is a good idea?" she asked over lunch. "You're spending a fortune to impress people who have never appreciated you before. What makes you think this time will be different?" "It's not about the money," I insisted. "It's about showing them that I'm successful and capable, that I can provide something special for the family too." Stephanie gave me a knowing look. "Just like you've been trying to show them your whole life. How's that working out so far?" Her words stung because they contained truth. I had been seeking validation through achievement my entire life, and it had never been enough. Even doctors. Warner expressed concerns during our therapy session. "What are your expectations for this vacation, Mia?" she asked. "I want us to connect as a family," I answered. "I want them to see me as an equal to Jake. And if that doesn't happen, if they continue the same patterns even after your generous gesture, I hadn't wanted to consider that possibility." "Then at least I'll know I tried everything," I finally said. "And maybe it's time to accept that things won't change and adjust my involvement accordingly." Dr. Warner nodded. "Just remember to set boundaries during this trip. You deserve respect regardless of what you provide financially or logistically." As the departure date approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. I packed and repacked my suitcase, trying to anticipate every possible scenario. I even purchased thoughtful gifts for everyone, a custom golf club for my father, a silk scarf from a designer my mother admired, and a high-end camera for Jake to document his adventures. The night before our flight, I barely slept. I kept imagining the moment when my family would realize what I had arranged. In my fantasy, they would be overwhelmed with gratitude and admiration. My father would put his arm around me and say he was proud. My mother would apologize for overlooking my accomplishments for so long. Jake would see me as someone worthy of respect. Deep down, I knew these scenarios were unlikely. But hope is a persistent thing, especially when it comes to family. Despite years of disappointment, part of me still believed that this grand gesture might finally be the thing that changed everything. Little did I know that this vacation would indeed change our family dynamic forever, just not in the way I had imagined. Our family reunion at Boston Logan Airport was exactly as awkward as I had anticipated. My parents arrived first, my father checking his watch and sighing dramatically when I approached, as if my punctuality 15 minutes before boarding was somehow inconvenient. "There she is," my mother said, giving me a quick, perfunctory hug. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd make it." "I'm early," I pointed out, but the observation fell on deaf ears as they both turned to wave enthusiastically at Jake, who was jogging toward us, clearly having arrived at the last minute. "Traffic was insane," he announced, receiving warm embraces and immediate sympathy from our parents. "We saved you a seat in our row," my mother told him. "Mia's sitting across the aisle." Of course she was. I hadn't expected anything different, but it still stung to be so casually separated from the family unit. The flight to Hawaii was long. I watched from across the aisle as my parents fawned over Jake's stories about his new job and friends. They hung on every word of his elaborate plans for a side business selling custom-printed surfboards, though he had never actually surfed before. When I attempted to share details about my promotion and the sustainable investment initiative I was spearheading, my mother nodded distractedly while my father flipped through the in-flight magazine. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, clearly not listening. "Jake, tell us more about that rooftop party you mentioned." I retreated into my book and noise-canceling headphones for the remainder of the flight. When we finally arrived at the Royal Hawaiian Resort, I felt a flutter of anticipation. The property was even more stunning in person, with its iconic pink facade, lush gardens, and prime beachfront location. The open-air lobby featured soaring ceilings, tropical flowers, and attentive staff ready to cater to our every need. My parents, however, seemed determined to find fault. "This place looks expensive," my father muttered as we entered the ornate lobby. "I thought you said you got a deal, Mia." "The rooms are quite reasonable for what they offer," I assured him, not mentioning that I was covering most of the cost myself. "And the location is unbeatable," my mother sniffed. "It's a bit showy for my taste. All this pink." Jake at least seemed impressed, his eyes widening as he took in the ocean view visible from the lobby. "This is legit," he said, pulling out his phone to take photos. I had arranged with Mr. Kanahaley to first show my family the standard rooms they thought we had booked. This would make the penthouse reveal all the more impressive. As planned, a friendly staff member named Leilani greeted us and led us to the standard accommodations. "These are the ocean view rooms we had reserved initially," she explained with a knowing smile in my direction. "You'll have a chance to see them before continuing to your actual accommodations." My parents nodded, oblivious to the hint, while Jake was already claiming the larger of the two rooms. "I'll take this one," he announced, throwing his backpack onto one of the beds. "Mom, Dad, you can have the other room, and Mia can take the sofa bed in the living area." I waited for my parents to object to point out that there were 2 beds in each room, or that Jake and I could share a room while they took the other. Instead, my mother simply nodded. "That makes sense," she agreed. "Jake needs his space, and Mia doesn't mind the sofa bed, do you, honey? You've always been easygoing." I wasn't feeling particularly easygoing in that moment. "Actually, I was thinking Jake and I could each take a bed in one room, and you and Dad could have the other room," I suggested. My father frowned. "Jake has back problems. He needs a proper bed." "I have back problems," Jake echoed, though this was the first I'd ever heard of it. "From my college football injury." Jake had played exactly 1 semester of college football as a bench warmer before quitting the team. "I have an early conference call tomorrow morning," I pointed out. "I need to be well rested." "You can do your call from the balcony," my mother suggested. "That way, you won't wake Jake." The unfairness of it all was so familiar, it was almost comical. Here I was, 32 years old, a successful professional who had arranged and largely paid for this entire vacation being relegated to the sofa, while my 30-year-old brother, who had contributed nothing, was given priority. I felt a flash of anger, but managed to keep my expression neutral. "We'll figure it out," I said vaguely, knowing that the room arrangement would soon be irrelevant. Leilani, who had been watching this exchange with barely concealed surprise, cleared her throat. Shall we proceed to dinner? Your reservation at the Ocean Terrace should be ready. Dinner was another exercise in invisibility. The restaurant was beautiful, with tables arranged on a terraced patio overlooking the beach. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the gentle sound of waves provided a soothing backdrop. The setting was perfect. The company was not. Jake dominated the conversation, announcing within minutes that he had big news. "I've decided to leave the marketing firm," he declared proudly, as if quitting a job he'd had for less than 6 months was an achievement. I nearly choked on my water. This job was half the reason for our celebration vacation. "Oh," my mother looked concerned. "But you just started there." Jake waved dismissively. "It wasn't challenging me creatively. Besides, I've got a much better opportunity lined up." "What kind of opportunity?" my father asked, leaning forward with interest. "My friend Tony and I are starting a premium kombucha brewery," Jake announced. "It's going to be huge. We're calling it Booch Brothers." I couldn't help myself. "Isn't this the same Tony who was your partner in the fitness app that never launched and the artisanal ice cream shop that closed after 3 months? Jake shot me an irritated look. "That was different. We've done our research this time." "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, patting his hand. "We always knew you had an entrepreneurial spirit." "How much will you need to invest?" my father asked pragmatically. Jake shifted in his seat. "Well, that's the thing. To do it right, we need about $50,000 for equipment and the first few months of operating costs. But it's a solid investment. Tony projects we'll break even within a year." Just like that, our celebration vacation had transformed into a funding pitch for Jake's latest doomed business venture. And based on my parents' receptive expressions, he would be getting every penny he asked for. Meanwhile, no one had asked a single question about my promotion or the sustainable investment division I was now heading. The achievement that had partly inspired this trip had been completely forgotten. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment alone to compose myself. In the elegant marble bathroom, I stared at my reflection and wondered why I kept setting myself up for disappointment. Why did I continue to seek approval from people who had shown time and again that they were incapable of giving it? Should I reveal the penthouse suite now? Would that change anything? Or would Jake somehow become the hero of that story too? I decided to wait until morning. Maybe after a night of rest, things would improve. Maybe this vacation could still be salvaged. I was wrong again. I spent an uncomfortable night on the sofa bed, which was too short for my 5'9" frame, and had a metal bar that dug into my back, regardless of position. The thin mattress offered little cushioning, and the sheets provided minimal comfort against the awkward frame. By morning, my body felt stiff and achy, a fitting physical manifestation of my emotional state. I woke to the sound of the room door closing. Groggily sitting up, I checked my phone to see it was just past 8. The room was empty. No note, no text message, nothing to indicate where everyone had gone. I called my mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. After showering and dressing, I made my way to the hotel's breakfast restaurant. Sure enough, there sat my family at a table by the window plates already half empty. They hadn't bothered to wake me or let me know their plans. "There you are," my mother said as I approached. "We didn't want to disturb you. You looked so peaceful." I doubted I had looked peaceful twisted up on that uncomfortable sofa, but I forced a smile and sat down in the remaining empty chair. A server quickly brought me a menu and coffee. "We were just discussing our plans for the week," my father informed me. "Jake thinks we should extend our stay by a few days." "I can't extend," I said immediately. "I have meetings scheduled that can't be moved." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Surely they can manage without you for a few more days. This is family time, Mia." I'm leading those meetings, I explained. The Sustainable Investment Initiative is my project. I can't just not show up. Always so rigid with your schedule, my father commented, as if my professional commitment was a character flaw rather than a responsibility. I bit back a retort about how my rigid schedule had funded a significant portion of this vacation. Instead, I sipped my coffee and tried to redirect the conversation. What activities were you thinking of for today? Jake wants to try surfing lessons, my mother announced. We thought we'd all go down to the beach and watch. It should be entertaining. So our entire day would be spent watching Jake attempt to surf. Perfect. Actually, I was thinking of checking out the cultural center this morning, I countered. They have a workshop on traditional Hawaiian crafts that looked interesting. You can do that another day, my father said. Today, we're supporting Jake's surfing adventure. Before I could respond, I overheard Jake's side of a phone conversation as he temporarily stepped away from the table. Yeah, man, they're totally on board, he was saying enthusiastically. Dad didn't even blink when I mentioned the 50 grand. I'll have the funds by the time we get back. So that was settled. My parents had already agreed to fund Jake's kombucha brewery, no questions asked. The same parents who had lectured me about financial independence when I asked for a $2,000 loan to repair my car transmission 3 years ago. When Jake returned to the table, the conversation shifted to his surf lesson and then to his accommodation complaints. That sofa bed is actually pretty uncomfortable, he mentioned, though he hadn't been the one sleeping on it. And the room feels cramped with all our stuff. My mother immediately looked concerned. Is your back bothering you again? Jake nodded solemnly. A little. That football injury never really healed right. Perhaps we could arrange something else, my father suggested, looking at me. I waited, curious to see where this was going. Mia, my mother began in her most reasonable tone. Would you mind looking into getting your own room? That way, Jake could have the bedroom to himself, and your father and I would keep the other room. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. They wanted me to pay for an additional room so Jake could have more space. The unfairness of it was so blatant, so egregious, that it momentarily took my breath away. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All the years of swallowing my feelings, of making excuses for their behavior, of telling myself that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment, suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. I was done. That's an interesting suggestion, I said calmly, though I could feel my heart pounding. My phone buzzed with a text message from Stephanie. How's family fun time going? Surviving? I quickly typed back. They just asked me to get my own room so Jake can have the bedroom to himself. Her response was immediate. What time to unleash the penthouse girl? Stand up for yourself? She was right. I had spent my entire life trying to earn equal treatment through good behavior and achievement. It had never worked because the problem wasn't me. It never had been. Actually, I said, setting down my coffee cup, I've been thinking about our accommodation situation as well. My family looked at me with mild interest, probably expecting me to capitulate as I always had. The current rooms aren't really working for any of us, I continued, so I've made alternative arrangements. What kind of arrangements? My father asked suspiciously. Nothing too expensive, I hope. I stood up from the table. Why don't we check out of our current rooms, and I'll show you. I've already spoken with the hotel manager. Everything's prepared. My family exchanged confused glances, but eventually followed me out of the restaurant and toward the lobby. I texted Mr. Kanahele that we were ready for the reveal, and he confirmed he would meet us in the main reception area. As we approached the elegant front desk, my heart was racing with a mixture of anxiety and something that felt surprisingly like power. For once, I was controlling the narrative. Kanahele was waiting for us, his professional demeanor betraying only a hint of the surprise he knew was coming. He greeted us warmly. Ms. Thompson, your family's new accommodations are ready whenever you are. he said with a slight bow. "What's going on, Mia?" my father demanded. "What have you done?" I took a deep breath and allowed myself a small smile. "Well, Dad, since you asked, when you and Mom suggested I should sleep on the couch so Jake could have the bed, and then recommended I get my own room entirely, I realized something funny." I paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "What's that?" my mother asked warily. "That's funny," I said, "because I actually booked the Presidential Penthouse Suite months ago. It has 3 full bedrooms, so nobody needs to sleep on any couches." The look of shock on their faces was everything I had imagined and more. My father's jaw actually dropped. My mother's eyes widened comically. Jake, surprisingly, was the first to recover his expression, shifting quickly from surprise to calculation. "The Presidential Suite," he repeated. "Isn't that like the best room in the hotel?" Mr. Kanahele nodded. "The Presidential Penthouse Suite is our premier accommodation. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, a private infinity pool, and panoramic ocean views. It's quite spectacular." "But that must cost a fortune," my father sputtered. "Mia, we talked about being reasonable with expenses." "It's already paid for," I said simply. "In full, my treat." "You didn't need to do that," my mother said, but her eyes had taken on an interested gleam. "Though it does sound lovely." "Shall I have your belongings transferred from your current rooms?" Mr. Kanahele asked. My family nodded, still looking dazed. "Excellent. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your new accommodations." As we walked toward the exclusive elevator that would take us to the penthouse level, Jake sidled up beside me. "This is awesome, sis," he said, his voice lowered. "Does it have a hot tub?" And I called dibs on the master bedroom. I stopped walking and turned to face him. "Actually, Jake, the room assignments have already been arranged. Mom and Dad have the master suite. I have the ocean view bedroom. You have the garden view bedroom." Jake frowned. "But I should get the second best room. I have seniority." "Seniority?" I repeated, incredulous. "This isn't a corporate hierarchy, Jake. And even if it were, I'm older than you. More importantly, I booked and paid for the suite. Girls don't need as much space as guys," he argued, falling back on the sexist logic that had worked for him throughout our childhood. My father stepped in. "Now, Mia, if Jake needs the larger room, I'm sure you wouldn't mind switching. You've always been so accommodating." Something inside me snapped. All the carefully constructed patience I had maintained throughout my adult life suddenly evaporated. "No," I said firmly. "I would mind. I've been accommodating my entire life, and where has it gotten me? Sleeping on sofa beds while Jake gets preferential treatment, being asked to get a separate room so he can have more space, having my professional achievements ignored while his latest harebrained business scheme gets immediate funding and support." My mother looked shocked. "Mia, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" I challenged. "When was the last time you showed the same enthusiasm for my accomplishments that you show for Jake's? When have you ever prioritized my needs over his? Can you name a single instance?" My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "We don't play favorites, Mia. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" I asked. "Let's review. Jake got a car for his 16th birthday. I got driving lessons and was told I could save up for my own car. Jake had his college fully funded, including an apartment off campus. I had to work part-time and take out student loans. Jake's had multiple failed businesses funded without question. I was lectured about fiscal responsibility when I needed a small loan for car repairs." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "That's different. I have different needs." "No, Jake. You don't have different needs. You've just never been held to the same standards. You've never had to work for anything because Mom and Dad have always provided it, no questions asked." My mother's eyes filled with tears, her go-to response whenever confronted with uncomfortable truths. We've always supported both of you. We love you both equally. Love isn't just a feeling, Mom. It's demonstrated through actions, and your actions have consistently shown that Jake matters more, that his comfort, his preferences, his dreams deserve more support than mine. That's not true, my father protested, though his tone lacked conviction. It is true, I insisted, and I've accepted it for far too long. I've twisted myself into knots trying to earn equal treatment. I've achieved success in every area of my life, hoping it would finally make you proud enough to treat me as Jake's equal, but nothing has ever been enough. We had stopped in the middle of a hallway, our family drama now on display for anyone walking by. Mr. Canahaley discreetly stepped away to give us privacy while remaining within earshot. I booked this penthouse suite as a gift to all of us. I continued, my voice calmer now. I wanted to celebrate my promotion, which none of you has bothered to ask about, by the way. I wanted to create a special experience that might bring us closer together. But I realize now that no gesture, no achievement, no amount of success will ever change the fundamental dynamic of this family. Jake looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Mia, you're overreacting. It's just a room assignment. It's never been just about room assignments, Jake. It's about a lifetime of being treated as less than, and I'm done accepting it. My father stepped forward, his business negotiation face now firmly in place. Let's all calm down and discuss this reasonably. Mia, we appreciate the suite. It's very generous. Now let's move forward and enjoy our vacation without all this drama. Classic Richard Thompson trying to sweep uncomfortable emotions under the rug and move on without addressing the actual issues. I'm happy to move forward, I said, but things will be different from now on. I've earned my place at this table, and I expect to be treated with the same respect and consideration that Jake receives automatically. That starts with the room arrangements staying exactly as I've planned them. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of unacknowledged hurts and unexamined patterns. Finally, my mother nodded slightly. Fine, she said quietly. The rooms will stay as you arranged them. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground in the face of family pressure and not backed down. The world hadn't ended. They hadn't disowned me, and most surprisingly, they had conceded. Thank you, I said simply. Now shall we continue to the suite? I think you'll like what you see. As we resumed our walk to the elevator, I caught Mr. Canahaley's eye. He gave me a subtle nod of approval. In that moment, I stood a little taller, feeling the first stirrings of what it meant to truly advocate for myself. Little did I know, this confrontation was just the beginning. The real reckoning was still to come. The Presidential Penthouse Suite exceeded even my expectations, as Mr. Canahaley led us through the private entrance using a special keycard reserved only for this accommodation. I watched my family's expressions shift from lingering annoyance to undisguised awe. The foyer opened into a vast living area with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a panoramic view of Waikiki Beach. Elegant Hawaiian-inspired decor blended seamlessly with modern luxury. A grand piano sat in one corner, while a fully stocked wet bar occupied another. Fresh tropical flower arrangements perfumed the air, and custom lighting cast a warm glow over the space. This is the main level, Mr. Canahaley explained, leading us through the expansive room. It includes the living area, dining room, gourmet kitchen, library, and media room. The terrace features your private infinity pool and outdoor dining area. He slid open glass doors to reveal a spacious terrace with a sleek infinity pool that appeared to merge with the ocean beyond. Comfortable loungers, a covered dining area, and a professional-grade outdoor kitchen completed the space. My father whistled softly. This is something else, Mia. The master suite occupies the eastern wing of this level. Mr. Kanahele continued showing my parents to their accommodation. It includes a king-sized bed, sitting area walk-in closet, and a bathroom with a soaking tub and ocean view shower. My mother ran her hand over the silky bedspread, her eyes wide, as she took in the private terrace and breathtaking views. For once, she seemed speechless. Upstairs are 2 additional bedroom suites. Mr. Kanahele continued leading us up a floating staircase. Ms. Thompson's room is the ocean view suite with the private balcony. Mr. Jake's room is the garden view suite with the adjoining meditation garden. Both rooms were spectacular, though mine was indeed larger and offered superior views. Jake tried to mask his disappointment with feigned indifference, but I could tell he was calculating whether another attempt to switch rooms might be successful. After our confrontation, however, he seemed unwilling to push the issue further. "A private butler is available 24 hours a day," Mr. Kanahele informed us. "Sebastian will be attending to your needs throughout your stay. The refrigerator has been stocked according to Ms. Thompson's specifications, and dinner reservations have been arranged for each evening of your stay. The resort's amenities are at your full disposal, and we've arranged private beach access for your convenience." As he concluded the tour, Mr. Kanahele handed each of us our key cards. "If there's anything else you require, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. Enjoy your stay at the Royal Hawaiian." After he departed, my family stood in awkward silence, the lingering tension from our earlier confrontation hanging in the air. The spectacular setting only heightened the emotional dissonance. "Well," my father finally said, clearing his throat. "This is certainly impressive, Mia. Thank you for arranging it." It was perhaps the most genuine expression of gratitude I'd received from him in years. I nodded, acknowledging his words without giving away how much they meant to me. "I need to make some work calls," I said. "I'll be on my balcony if anyone needs me." As I retreated to my room, I heard my parents and Jake beginning to explore the suite further, their voices carrying tones of excitement and wonder. I closed my door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The confrontation had been uncomfortable but necessary. For the first time, I had named the family dynamic that had shaped my entire life. I had refused to accept the unequal treatment that had always been our status quo. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. I stepped onto my private balcony and breathed in the salt air. The ocean stretched before me, vast and unchanging. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Did you drop the penthouse bomb? How did it go?" I smiled faintly and typed, "Mission accomplished. Family in shock. Actually stood up for myself for once." Her response was immediate. "OMG. Yes, so proud of you. Details, please." As I was typing a response, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Jake standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Hey," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to another. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside to let him enter, curious about what he might want to say. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the view for a moment before turning to face me. "This suite is incredible," he said. "Must have cost a fortune." I shrugged, not wanting to discuss the financial details with him. "It was within my budget." Jake nodded, then took a deep breath. "Look about what happened downstairs. I never realized you felt that way." "About how Mom and Dad treat us differently." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You never noticed?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I guess I didn't want to notice. It was easier to just accept their support without questioning it." "It's easy not to question preferential treatment when you're the one receiving it," I pointed out. "Yeah, I get that now." He ran a hand through his hair. "For what it's worth, I do think you're really successful. I've actually always been kind of intimidated by you." This surprised me. Intimidated by me? "You've always had everything figured out," he explained. "Perfect grades, great career, financial stability. Meanwhile, I can barely keep a job for 6 months. I think Mom and Dad overcompensate because they know you don't really need their help, but I obviously do. I considered this perspective. There might be some truth to it, but it didn't excuse decades of unequal treatment. That might explain part of it, I acknowledged. But it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't address the fact that they've consistently valued your comfort and preferences over mine, even in situations where we should be equals. Jake nodded slowly. I can see that now, and I'm sorry if I've contributed to it. His apology seemed genuine, if somewhat self-serving. I suspected his sudden insight had more to do with ensuring continued access to the penthouse amenities than a real understanding of our family dynamics. Thank you for saying that, I replied neutrally. Jake glanced around the room again. So, about the kombucha business. And there it was, the real reason for his visit. What about it? I asked. I was thinking, since you're so good with finances and business planning, maybe you could help me put together a proper proposal for Dad. Something that looks professional. I almost laughed at the transparency of his request. One semi-apology, and he was already angling for my assistance in securing funding for his latest venture. Jake, I'm a financial consultant. People pay substantial fees for the kind of advice you're asking for. He looked genuinely confused. But you're my sister. Yes, and as your sister, here's my free advice. If you can't create a business proposal yourself, you're not ready to run a business. And if this kombucha venture is like all your previous attempts, you'll lose every penny invested in it. His expression darkened. That's harsh. I thought you'd be more supportive after all that talk about equal treatment. Equal treatment doesn't mean automatic support for bad ideas, I clarified. It means being held to the same standards. If you want to start a successful business, do the work. Research the market, create a detailed business plan, understand your financials. Don't expect others to do it for you or bail you out when it fails. Jake's friendly demeanor evaporated. You know, this is why people find you difficult, Mia. You're so rigid and judgmental. Not everyone can be Miss Perfect like you. And just like that, we were back to familiar territory. I sighed, disappointed, but not surprised. I have a conference call in 5 minutes, Jake. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss? He shook his head and moved toward the door. Enjoy your view. Some of us have to actually have fun on vacation instead of working all the time. After he left, I sat on my balcony and tried to process the interaction. Jake's brief moment of insight had quickly reverted to his usual defensive tactics when he didn't get what he wanted. It was a pattern I recognized all too well. A few minutes later, another knock came at my door. This time, it was my mother, her eyes slightly red as if she'd been crying. May I come in? She asked hesitantly. I nodded and gestured to the sitting area in my room. She perched on the edge of a chair, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. Mia, she began, her voice wavering slightly. I want you to know how much we appreciate this suite. It's truly generous of you. Thank you, I said simply. She twisted her hands in her lap. What you said downstairs, about how we treat you and Jake differently. I want you to know that we love you both equally. We've always been proud of you. Love and pride aren't the issue, Mom, I replied gently. It's about how that love is expressed through actions and decisions. It's about respect and consideration. A tear slipped down her cheek. We never meant to make you feel less valued. You've always been so capable, so independent. We didn't think you needed us the way Jake does. It was the same reasoning Jake had suggested, and it still felt like an excuse rather than an understanding. Needing less practical support doesn't mean needing less emotional support, I explained. And frankly, constantly bailing Jake out hasn't helped him become more independent. If anything, it's enabled his dependency. My mother looked startled by this perspective. We just want to help him succeed. I know, but sometimes helping means letting someone face the consequences of their choices so they can learn and grow. Jake has never had to do that. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Your father and I will discuss this. We never intended to hurt you, Mia. It wasn't the full acknowledgement or apology I might have hoped for, but it was something. A crack in the foundation of our family dynamic that might allow for future change. Thank you for listening, I said. After my mother left, I had my conference call discussing project timelines with my team back in Boston. It felt grounding to connect with my professional life, where my contributions were valued and my leadership respected. That evening, we had dinner on the penthouse terrace. The private chef prepared a spectacular meal, and for a while, we managed to maintain civil conversation about safe topics, the resort amenities, tomorrow's weather forecast, local attractions we might visit. My father, who had been mostly quiet since our confrontation, finally addressed me directly as dessert was being served. That sustainable investment initiative you're heading, he said, surprising me by referencing my work. What exactly does that entail? For a moment, I was too shocked to respond. In all our family gatherings, my father had never asked a substantive question about my career. It's a new division focusing on environmentally and socially responsible investments, I explained cautiously. We're creating portfolios that meet specific sustainability criteria while still delivering competitive returns. He nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like a growing market. Smart positioning. It wasn't effusive praise, but from Richard Thompson, it was practically a standing ovation. I felt a strange mixture of pleasure at the acknowledgement and sadness that such a basic expression of interest felt so monumental. The evening ended on this cautiously positive note. As I prepared for bed in my luxurious suite, I reflected on the day's events. The confrontation had been uncomfortable but necessary. Small shifts had already occurred in our family dynamic, though whether they would last beyond this vacation remained to be seen. What was clear was that something had changed within me. I had finally given voice to truths I had suppressed for decades. I had stood firm in my worth and refused to accept less than I deserved. Whatever happened next, I knew I wouldn't go back to being the accommodating, approval-seeking daughter I had been before. As I drifted off to sleep with the sound of waves in the distance, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. The path forward with my family was uncertain, but for the first time, I was approaching it on my own terms. The next few days unfolded in a strange new reality. The penthouse provided enough space for us to coexist without constant interaction, which proved to be both a blessing and a challenge. We each established our own rhythms, occasionally converging for meals or activities before retreating to our separate corners. The morning after our confrontation, I woke early and enjoyed coffee on my balcony, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of pink and gold. There was something cleansing about having finally spoken my truth, even if it had created temporary discomfort. I spent that day mostly alone, taking a guided tour of the cultural center I had mentioned at breakfast the previous day. The experience was fascinating, offering insights into Hawaiian traditions, art, and history. I learned about lei making traditional navigation techniques and the significance of various cultural symbols. When I returned to the suite in the afternoon, I found my family lounging by our private pool. They looked up as I joined them, a momentary awkwardness hanging in the air. "How was the cultural center?" my mother asked, making a visible effort to show interest. "It was wonderful," I replied, sitting on a nearby lounger. "I learned how to make a traditional lei. They use specific flowers for different occasions and meanings." "That sounds interesting," my father commented, though his tone suggested he found it anything but. Jake was scrolling through his phone, apparently absorbed in something more engaging than our conversation. I noticed he had a sunburn across his shoulders, suggesting his surfing lesson had indeed taken place. "How was surfing?" I asked him. He looked up surprised by my question. "It was harder than it looks. The instructor said I have natural balance, though." Of course he did. "I got some great photos," my mother added, reaching for her phone. "Would you like to see?" She showed me a series of pictures of Jake standing beside a surfboard on the beach, Jake in the water, attempting to stand on the board, Jake falling off the board. There were at least 30 nearly identical images. "Very nice," I said, handing back her phone. An uncomfortable silence fell over us again. My father cleared his throat. "We were thinking of doing a sunset cruise tomorrow evening," he said. "The concierge recommended it highly. Would you like to join us?" The invitation felt like an olive branch, an acknowledgement that I should be included in family plans rather than having them decided without me. "I'd like that," I replied. "Thank you for thinking of me." The moment passed, but it felt significant, a small step toward a different kind of family interaction. That evening, we had reservations at the resort's premier restaurant. The meal was exquisite, featuring local ingredients prepared with French techniques. To my surprise, my parents made efforts to include me in the conversation, asking about my cultural center experience and even my work projects. Jake remained somewhat sullen, perhaps feeling displaced from his customary position as the center of attention. When he mentioned his kombucha business idea, however, my father's response surprised me. "Before we discuss any investment," he said carefully, "I'd like to see a proper business plan. Market research, startup costs, projected revenue, that sort of thing." Jake looked stunned. "But you never asked for that before." My father glanced briefly in my direction before responding. "Perhaps I should have. Let's approach this more professionally this time." It was a small but meaningful shift. My mother quickly changed the subject to safer territory, but the message had been delivered. Something in our family dynamic was changing. Over the next few days, we established an uneasy truce. We participated in some activities together, like the sunset cruise, which proved to be breathtakingly beautiful, and spent other time pursuing our separate interests. I took a hiking tour of the rainforest, visited local art galleries, and still managed to handle my work responsibilities during early mornings and evenings. I also made connections with other guests and staff at the resort, finding genuine pleasure in conversations that didn't carry decades of emotional baggage. Mr. Kanahele, in particular, became something of a friendly confidant. During one of our conversations, he shared his own family reconciliation story. "Family dynamics can be deeply entrenched," he told me as we chatted in the lobby one afternoon. "My father and I didn't speak for nearly 5 years after a business disagreement. When we finally reconnected, it wasn't because either of us suddenly changed completely. It was because we found a new way to interact with clearer boundaries and more honest communication." His words resonated with me. Perhaps that was the best I could hope for with my family. Not a complete transformation, but a recalibration of our relationships with healthier boundaries. On our 5th day in Hawaii, an unexpected complication arose. Jake's girlfriend, Tiffany, arrived at the resort apparently at his invitation. He had neglected to mention this to any of us until she was already en route. "Tiffany had some vacation days to use," he explained casually at breakfast. "I thought it would be fun to have her join us." My mother immediately switched into hostess mode. "That's wonderful. We'll need to arrange another room. Mia, can you speak with the hotel about adding a connecting room to our suite?" And just like that, I was expected to solve the logistical problem created by Jake's unilateral decision. Some patterns were harder to break than others. "Actually," I said calmly, "the presidential suite can't be modified with connecting rooms, but Jake is welcome to check if there are available rooms elsewhere in the hotel. I'm happy to introduce him to Mr. Kanahele, who can assist with the booking." My mother looked briefly flustered but nodded. "Yes, of course. Jake should handle that." Jake looked annoyed but pulled out his phone and made the call himself. Another small victory for appropriate responsibility. When Tiffany arrived that afternoon, the dynamic shifted once again. She was a vivacious, attractive woman who worked in pharmaceutical sales. I had met her briefly at Christmas last year but hadn't formed much of an impression beyond her seeming genuinely fond of Jake. What I hadn't expected was the diamond ring Jake produced during dinner that evening. As the sun set over the ocean, he dropped to one knee beside our table and proposed to a tearful, delighted Tiffany. The moment was genuinely touching, and I found myself happy for them, despite my complicated feelings about Jake. Tiffany seemed to balance his more impulsive tendencies with practical good sense. My parents were ecstatic. My mother cried and immediately began discussing wedding venues. My father ordered champagne and made a toast to the happy couple. Their joy was palpable, and I realized with a pang far more enthusiastic than any reaction they had ever shown to my achievements. Some things hadn't changed after all. Later that night, I overheard my parents discussing wedding costs in their room as I passed by on my way to the kitchen for water. From the figures they were mentioning, they were planning to finance an extravagant celebration without hesitation. The familiar feeling of invisibility washed over me again. My confrontation had caused some minor adjustments in our interactions, but the fundamental priority system remained intact. Jake's life events would always outshine mine in our family narrative. The next morning, I made a decision. After confirming with the hotel that I could modify my reservation, I approached my family at breakfast. "I've decided to move to a separate suite for the remainder of our stay," I announced calmly. My mother looked stricken. "But why, is something wrong with your room?" "Nothing's wrong with the room," I assured her. "But with Jake's engagement and Tiffany joining us, this seems like a good time for me to step back and give you all space to celebrate. I'll still join you for some activities, but I think we could all use a little breathing room." "Is this because of the engagement?" my father asked, frowning. "Are you jealous?" The old Richard Thompson immediately assuming the worst of my motivations. Some things really hadn't changed. "I'm very happy for Jake and Tiffany," I said sincerely. "This isn't about jealousy. It's about recognizing that our family dynamic still has some challenges and giving us all space to process what that means going forward." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "But we've been getting along so well these past few days." Had we, or had we simply been avoiding difficult conversations and reverting to familiar patterns at the first opportunity? "We have made progress," I acknowledged, "and I want to preserve that progress by not forcing interactions that might lead to more conflict. I think a little distance will be good for all of us right now." Jake, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I get it, Mia, and thanks for being cool about Tiffany joining us." It was perhaps the most mature response he had ever given me. I nodded in appreciation. "You'll still join us for the luau tomorrow night?" My mother pressed anxiously. "Yes, I'll be there," I promised. "And we'll have dinner together again before we leave. This isn't me cutting ties. It's just me creating a healthier boundary." My father looked like he wanted to argue further, but surprisingly, he simply nodded. "It's your decision, Mia. We'll respect that." That afternoon, I moved to a lovely ocean view suite on a different floor. It wasn't as spectacular as the penthouse, but it offered peace and privacy that felt increasingly valuable. As I unpacked my few belongings, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The remainder of the vacation passed more smoothly than I could have anticipated. I joined my family for selected activities and meals, maintaining cordial relations without the constant pressure of proving my worth. In my private time, I explored the island at my own pace, made friends with other guests, and even enjoyed a flirtation with an attractive diving instructor that led to a memorable dinner on the beach. On our final evening together, We gathered for dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the ocean. The conversation remained light, focusing on pleasant memories from the trip and safe topics like the beauty of the island. Tiffany's presence actually helped as her outsider status disrupted some of our established patterns. As dessert was served, my father surprised me by raising his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, looking directly at me. "To Mia, who made this extraordinary vacation possible. Thank you for your generosity and for giving us all something to think about." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of our family's issues, but coming from my father, it was significant. I raised my glass in response, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. "To family," I replied simply, "and to new beginnings." As we clinked glasses, I caught my mother's eye. She gave me a small, tremulous smile that contained both regret and hope. Jake nodded at me with unexpected respect. Tiffany, blissfully unaware of the layers of meaning in this exchange, beamed happily. In that moment, I realized that while our family might never be what I had once wished for, there was potential for something new to emerge from the ashes of old expectations. It wouldn't be perfect, but it might be healthier. And for now, that was enough. 6 months after our Hawaiian vacation, I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching autumn leaves drift past on a cool Boston breeze. So much had changed since that pivotal confrontation in the hotel lobby. Some changes were external: the new apartment, a different hairstyle, a promotion to executive leadership. Others were internal and far more significant. The weeks following our return from Hawaii had been challenging. The fragile new dynamic we had established during the vacation was tested by the return to familiar environments and patterns. My parents particularly, my mother made frequent attempts to pull me back into our old relationships through guilt and emotional manipulation. "Family should talk every day," she would say when I didn't immediately return her calls. "I don't understand why you're being so distant." Setting and maintaining boundaries proved to be an ongoing process rather than a one-time declaration. I limited my visits to once a month rather than the weekly dinners my mother requested. I declined to be drawn into Jake's latest dramas, including the postponement of his engagement when Tiffany discovered he had significant credit card debt he hadn't disclosed. "Can't you talk to her?" my mother had pleaded over the phone. "Explain that financial problems are normal for newlyweds." "That's between Jake and Tiffany," I had replied firmly. "And financial transparency is actually important in a relationship." Each small refusal to fall back into old patterns was difficult but strengthening. I worked intensively with Dr. Warner to process the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. "Healing doesn't mean they suddenly become the family you always wanted," she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. "It means you stop expecting them to be that family and build your life around healthier relationships." Those words became my mantra as I invested more deeply in friendships and connections outside my family circle. Stephanie and I started a monthly dinner club with other professional women, creating a support network of ambitious, caring individuals who celebrated each other's successes. I also found unexpected solace in building what Dr. Warner called my chosen family, people connected by bonds of genuine affection and mutual respect, rather than merely DNA. This included my assistant Marcus, whose wit and efficiency made every workday better. My neighbor Eleanor, a retired professor who shared my love of classic films, and several colleagues who became true friends beyond the office. 3 months after the vacation, I received a surprise email from my father. It was brief, just a few sentences acknowledging a recent profile of me in the Boston Business Journal, highlighting the success of my sustainable investment initiative. "Saw the article. Impressive results. The approach you've developed is innovative. Well done." From anyone else, it might have seemed like faint praise. From Richard Thompson, it was unprecedented. I printed the email and kept it in my desk drawer, a small token of the shift that was slowly occurring. My mother made more overt efforts to repair our relationship, suggesting we meet for coffee without my father or Jake present. Our first meeting was tense, with her alternating between defensive justifications of past behavior and tearful pleas for more frequent contact. "I just don't understand why you can't visit more often," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "We're still your parents, Mia." "I'm not disputing that," I replied calmly. "I'm just creating a relationship that's healthier for me." It took several such conversations before she began to accept that our relationship had permanently changed. Gradually, our coffee meetings became less emotionally fraught and more genuinely connected. She even asked thoughtful questions about my work and listened to the answers. Jake and I maintained limited contact, primarily through group family messages and occasional brief phone calls. Without the direct comparison and competition that had characterized our relationship for decades, we found it easier to interact in small doses. He had reconciled with Tiffany after attending financial counseling, and their wedding plans were back on, albeit with a significantly reduced budget that they were funding largely themselves. My father remained somewhat distant, though the occasional email or text message suggesting an article related to my industry indicated he was making efforts in his own way. For a man who had never been emotionally demonstrative, it represented significant movement. As for my own life, I found myself flourishing in ways I hadn't anticipated. The energy I had previously poured into seeking family approval was now directed toward my own goals and happiness. I applied for and received a promotion to the executive leadership team. I started mentoring younger women in finance, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others navigate careers in a male-dominated industry. I even began dating again after years of focusing primarily on work. Mark, a landscape architect I met through Eleanor, brought a calm, creative energy into my life that complemented my more analytical approach. Our relationship was still new, but it felt healthy and balanced in a way my previous relationships hadn't. "He treats you with respect," Stephanie observed after meeting him. "And you're not trying to earn his approval. That's new for you." She was right. The patterns I had learned in my family had affected all my relationships, causing me to seek validation through achievement and accommodation. Breaking free of those patterns was allowing me to build connections based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. As I stood at my window reflecting on these changes, my phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. "Thinking of you today. Hope your presentation goes well." She had remembered my important client presentation without prompting. It was a small thing, but significant. I texted back a simple thank you and felt a sense of peace wash over me. The Hawaiian vacation hadn't magically fixed my family. In many ways, it had simply exposed issues that had been present all along. But that exposure had been necessary for any real change to begin. By standing up for myself by refusing to accept less than I deserved, I had disrupted patterns established over decades. The future of my family relationships remained uncertain. There would be backsliding and difficult moments alongside the progress. My parents might never fully acknowledge or understand the impact of their favoritism. Jake might always receive a disproportionate share of their emotional and financial support. But I had discovered something more valuable than their validation: my own self-worth. I no longer measured my value by their recognition of it. I no longer needed to prove myself worthy of equal treatment. I simply knew that I was worthy and made choices accordingly. As I prepared for my client presentation, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. Standing up for oneself is rarely a single dramatic moment that resolves all issues. More often, it's a series of small choices day after day to honor your own worth even when others question it. It's setting boundaries and maintaining them even when doing so is uncomfortable. It's recognizing that you cannot control how others treat you, but you can control whether you accept that treatment. For anyone facing similar family dynamics or unequal relationships, I would offer this hard-won wisdom. Your value is not determined by others' recognition of it. Respect begins with valuing yourself enough to expect it from others. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is create distance from relationships that consistently diminish you, even when those relationships are with family. The healing process isn't linear, and it doesn't have a neat conclusion. It's ongoing work that requires courage and persistence. But the freedom that comes with breaking free of toxic patterns is worth every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable boundary setting, every moment of standing firm in your own worth. As I gathered my presentation materials and prepared to leave, I felt grateful for the painful but necessary journey of the past 6 months. The family vacation had been a turning point, not because it fixed everything, but because it started me on a path towards something better, a life defined by self-respect rather than the endless pursuit of external validation. And that, I realized, was the most luxurious upgrade of all. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation? What boundaries have you set to protect your mental health and relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is prioritize your own well-being, even when others don't understand. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and clarity in your own path to self-worth.